Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar, How Great North Wellhead and Frack is using automation to replace manual processes. Today your lines will be muted throughout the webinar, but if you do have any questions for our speakers, please pop them into the Q&A function and our presenters will answer those at the end. You will receive a copy of the recording after the webinar, and also a short survey will come up on your screen at the end, and we would just recommend if you could fill that out, just helps us develop our webinars further for the future. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers for today. So, today we are joined by Greg Dowell and Shay O'Connor. So Greg is the CFO of Great North Wellhead and Frack. He's a CPA with 20 years of experience in oil and gas services companies and industrial companies. As head of solutions here at FlowForma, Shay reviews the digital process needs of potential customers based upon the results they wish to achieve. He supports them with aligning the features and the facilities within the FlowForma process automation tool. Working with his clients in multiple sectors globally, Shay has significant experience in providing clients with direction to solving real-world issues with digital process automation. So without further ado, welcome guys today, and Shay, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Ursula. Welcome, everybody, and especially welcome, Greg, to today's webinar. Just from a background point of view, and before we jump into the specific use case that we have, that Greg has thankfully joined us to talk about, just wanted to give you a background based upon information that our good friends in Forrester Research have supplied us in regards to those digitizing and those not digitizing, etc. So it's nice. Forrester did this survey back in 2021 and released the results late in the year based upon the questions asked, and they basically went around thousands of organizations globally to see the progression in regards to digitizing and digital transformation and digital automation. Now, just to explain some of the results here, basically with the graph on the left-hand side, they found that 80% of the respondents basically had paper involved in all, most, many, or a few of their processes. So basically 80% of their processes included paper. Some of them included it was completely paper, and okay, that's a lower percentage, and as we all know, there's very few processes nowadays that have all paper. But the percentages grow as you move along where there's paper involved, and so you're talking about an 80% dependency on paper in any of those processes. The biggest rationale that they brought from this is that during periods where you have people either remotely involved in processes or just in different locations generally, so they could be in the office but in different locations, if there's any cross-departmental interactions, the processes broke down once there was paper involved. So even for the ones where they only had a few processes that included paper, they actually broke down during the periods where there was remote working. And as we all know, remote working is becoming more and more the standard. After COVID, people, well, it's nice saying after COVID, but you kind of feel it's after COVID. After our experiences so far with COVID, the rationale is now that people aren't necessarily all going to be together in the office. So what do you do to combat that? The graph on the right-hand side was showing that 99% of people were including Excel and Inbox as part of their electronic manual routing, right? So basically the routing of the manual information was through Excel and the Inbox, which means that they're not properly digitized from a process point of view. There's a misconception when people talk about digital transformation that, oh, the form is no longer physical, it is on the screen, it's a Word document, or it's information in my inbox. Technically, that is digital, but it's not a process, and you don't have visibility of where processes stand. You don't have accountability, and obvious accountability for steps in a process. So responsibility of who's doing what, when. Oh, I didn't know. I went into my inbox. I didn't see it. That sort of thing. There is no timer on your inbox for things like that, and Excel is the same. So the big scenario that they came up with out of this research was that in order to get your processes properly digitized, you have to automate each of the steps, but have them cohesively brought together. Now, the fact that we are working quite remotely, or have the option of working remotely a lot more now, means that it's not just a nice to have. So we find that a lot of organizations, they may start an initiative to digitally transform, and they see, and most organizations see that this would be a benefit. They've heard reports of other organizations that are doing it, and they're quite happy with the fact that, yes, it will improve how they operate, and especially going forward, it will facilitate the gathering of accurate data so they can make better decisions. The reality is that a lot of organizations don't take the step. So they don't take that move from becoming interested to actually actively digitizing. That is, it aligns pretty closely, that 20% aligns pretty closely with the law of diffusion for innovation, where about 16.5% it's reckoned would adopt digital process as part of the norm. 20%, 16.5%, you're pretty close. So there's the vast majority of people the vast majority of organizations are hesitant because they'll always put something else in front of from a priority point of view. They'll put it in front because it's a new way of working. Now, we're going to be talking to Greg now in a minute in regards to the fact that he as well as other organizations, approached this subject of digital transformation, evaluated why they needed to do it, and decided to do it. And taking that step puts them in that 16.5%, 20% of organizations. And the stat that we found so far of organizations that have reversed the digitization transformation initiative, the amount of organizations at the moment that we know of is 0%. So in other words, everybody that we know of that have gone down that route are sticking to it, and they're going for it because they are just expanding and expanding and expanding. What I'm going to do, I'm not going to paraphrase all the items here on the screen. You can see them for yourself, and they are pretty self-explanatory. The reality is you are changing the way you operate within your organization when you digitize, but you're changing it for now and for the future. And you're changing it for the benefit of everybody now and in the future. You're gathering information that's going to help everybody operate better because you're going to make decisions based upon data and not based upon hunches. So, I mean, a lot of people have experience, and that's where you start. So you start with the experience that has been gleaned over the years, but then you make amendments and you adjust your processes based upon the data. And that will help support all of the decisions that are made from the process point of view. Now, I grow tired of listening to my own voice. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move on to chat to Greg here just about a case study for Great North Wellhead and Frack. And as Ursula was saying earlier on, Greg is the CFO there, and they have tackled this initiative, and they have started this initiative in their organization. And it's a big step to go from the, it sounds like something I'd like to do, to, we are doing this. So we're taking that step. I want to talk to Greg about this today. One thing we might do, Greg, you've been listening to me for a few minutes now. I'm glad to see you're still awake and you haven't fallen asleep as a result. Can you tell us a little bit about Great North Wellhead and Frack?
Yeah, for sure, Shay. So Great North Wellhead and Frack, so we're based in Western Canada. We service mostly oil and gas companies, although a little bit in mining and industrial as well. We provide new and remanufactured equipment, wellhead equipment. We do rental equipment that includes some larger and smaller pieces. The larger one is kind of a padded frac well system that we have. We do field services, so think about guys with trucks out in the field doing service work and helping customers make sure everything's working properly. And then we also have an engineering team and machine shop capabilities for specialized and custom equipment. So we have a lot of different facets to our business and a lot of different moving parts, and lots of process requirements as a result of that. We have, we're with API, American Petroleum Institute, Monogram certification, ISO certification. We have 10 locations across Alberta and Saskatchewan and Western Canada. And we're privately owned and basically owned by a US-based private equity company and management.
Thanks for that background. Just a lot of moving parts there, I have to say. So I can already understand why you might look at trying to align things.
Yeah.
Just as a general question here, as you can see, what motivated you to digitize your processes, and what did you feel about the timing of it?
Yeah, for sure. So I think part of this was when you have a transition in ownership, which happens, coming up on 3 years ago. There's growth plans that are put in place. It's a kind of fresh look at the organization, and we looked at where the growth plan was and where our existing processes were. It became clear that to support that next phase of growth, we needed to have a look at our processes, and a lot of them were based on manual processes, so Excel, emails, a lot of stuff in people's heads, and it worked. It worked well, but the scalability of those processes, when you looked at the growth plans, there was a risk there of how you'd be able to manage that. I kind of looked at it as being that if you have to increase your capabilities and your processes to make the company work properly, you have to then look at either in changing the way you do things or adding more people. And when you stack it up from a cost point of view, usually adding the technology is more cost effective. And then also looking at it from just a general, how well is your efficiency process, and reducing the risk of human error, having stuff not being reliant on one person or a few key people that if they're sick or they leave, you have really big problems in your processes. The technology route became the one that we really wanted to look into because we thought it answered all those questions the best from this the type of processes we'd like going forward, as well as from a cost point of view.
Yeah, and I think staff, the feedback we get is that staff appreciate the fact that there are certain tasks that are normalized for them. Like that, they don't have to start asking other people, what do I do here? Who do I send this to? It's actually now when it's digitized in a process that it takes the guesswork out and they can get on with their own job. So the fact that the reason that they're employed there in the first place, that percentage time that they're doing that job increases because they're not doing those admin jobs. So I can see why this would be attractive.
Yeah, for sure.
And that scalability, as you say.
Yeah, and on that point, Shay, part of it is just how do you need more people to do this, but it's also looking at what are your people doing with their time right now, and is that the most value added that they could be doing? And the more time they're spending on manual activities and things that are, just kind of crunching through that sort of stuff or searching for data because they can't find it, that's usually not the best use of their time. They can be doing things that helps the company more with that time. So you're not only saving having to add more people, you're probably getting more effective use of the people that you have as well.
That time adds up. All those small bits and pieces of time, they all add up. And again, I think people are happier. They get frustrated when they get bogged down in administration. Totally frustrated because they end up wasting so much time doing something that hasn't added anything to their job or to the company or to the business. admin, and it's tedious, you know, and it can be like that.
For sure.
So, I mean, I'm going to jump straight in. I mean,
Yeah.
your rationale is solid, and honestly, it's very symptomatic of a lot of organizations who are basically, and it's great, and I think it's amazing that you actually took the time to say, hey, what are our staff doing at the moment with their time? And say, okay, well, we can improve on this. Obviously, then you started looking, you know, we can improve. So what did you look for in an automation tool?
Yeah, so I think as we started in the process, we were looking for, first and foremost, something that was easy to use. We didn't want people necessarily have to go and have a lot of time just learning how to use the software to do this. So something that was fairly intuitive and had the flexibility to make it that way. We wanted to have something where we could have an option for a third-party support to help us get started, to help us, you know, if we want to do some more processes, while we also got up our internal capabilities, and then that would also give us some flexibility to be able to scale up and scale down if we want to do more or less processes at the time. And then that was the value for money. So how does this look for scalability? If we start adding a lot of processes onto this, what does it do for the cost? How can we have that fixed, number of users, that sort of stuff? So we were looking there. And then we also wanted to fit with our existing IT environment. And this is one where having it within the Microsoft environment, so people are already used to using these type of things. It wasn't new licenses, that helped as well. So these all kind of fit together a little bit, but those are the main requirements that we had when we were looking at this.
I find it interesting. I don't know whether you have this in order, but and we find this a lot, is the money part. So the priority is within the organization. The money is not the highest priority. So it's not a case of first and foremost, it has to be this price, but it has to be a good system. It has to offer, you know, support. Like, you're thinking about the benefits, which is the perfect way of looking at it, but you're actually thinking about the benefits that this can bring to our organization first and foremost. And then let's see, does it fit in price wise? It's uncanny that we've seen that a lot.
Yeah, I think the way I looked at it was that you need people to use it to get the benefit from it, right?
Yeah.
And if people are using it, then and from the price points we're looking at, it made sense, especially when you start going down for what people are doing with their time, the, you know, saving an employee here or there, it all made a lot of sense. But that's only if people are using it and it's adopted. So that's why that easy to use system was probably, it is number one. The other ones, you know, vary them, but definitely want something that was easy to use.
Yeah, so there's no point in getting something that's X amount of money and it's hard to use and it doesn't do like, it has to tick those boxes before you look at the finance. Yeah,
Yep,
as I say,
exactly.
it's just interesting. As I say, it aligns perfectly with some of the analysis that we've seen, and we've actually sent out our own questionnaires to prospective clients about their priorities. And strangely enough, I mean, is that money, and they always say that price and cost are two different things. Like, so
Yeah.
the price is just the ticket price, but what's the actual cost of having this in or not having it in?
Yeah, for sure. And what's the cost of not having it in as well?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's the biggie. Like, they are, and again, if you get focused just on the price point, you are ignoring the cost in both directions. You know.
Yeah.
So this is again something, because you're dealing with transformation as an initiative and a different way of doing work. So you're not handing out sheets of paper anymore. You're not looking at your inbox as being your source of the truth anymore. But you need to get buy-in from stakeholders. So you need to get, the organization has to be behind this. I'm sure like you found this, but what advice do you have on anyone getting, and we have lots of feedback, but what would your advice be to anybody looking to get buy-in from stakeholders?
Yeah. So this one, I think it goes back to some of the stuff that we talked about in the first two questions. So one just being that outlining for them, here's what we're trying to do. Here's what we see some of the roadblocks being. So making sure they understand what the rationale is for doing this. And so I call it kind of the problem identification phase, but including the stakeholders very early in the process about here's what we see coming down the road. Here's what we see some of our options are to how to address this. What are your thoughts on this? And put out a couple of options for them for what it is. So they're involved very early in the process and in the selection side of it. It's also getting their feedback. You know, what do you guys want? And making sure that when they give you that feedback, you're listening to it. And so they feel like it's not something that is just being selected by management or whoever it was and saying, hey, now you have to use this tool. They understand why we're doing it, what the benefits are going to be on that. Also really kind of painting the picture of what it could look like. And so you know, we talk a little bit about how you select the different projects for that sort of stuff, but getting their feedback is, well, hey, here's where I think it could work. And they're going to come up with things that definitely things I hadn't thought about, benefits that I hadn't thought about, concerns they hadn't thought about. And so as we went through that process and helped them understand what it was, helped them understand and have a stake, I guess, in the ultimate selection of it. Then when we start going the pilot process, they feel like they're a part of it. They understand if there's bumps in the road that was expected. We're going to go through this. They're part of the solution as well to solve that sort of stuff. And so we started with a simple pilot process. Before we made any commitments, we were able to try this out and see how this worked, because it's one thing to see it on a screen and talk about it. It's another thing to actually have it in your organization working the way that you hoped it would. And so we started with a very simple pilot process, and we had a high confidence of success with that, and also had our early champions, I guess, for the solutions and digitization as well on that side of things. And then on that front, in terms of simple pilot processes, we didn't want to do one that needed a lot of redesign or improvement or had a lot of points right now. It was picking one that we're pretty happy with how this works. It's very manual. It's very time consuming. So let's put that into digitization and see how that goes. And yeah, and I'll get a bit more into that one project on what that looked like for the pilot on the next slide. But those were the main things for buy-in. So some very standard change management activities, but it's important that you take the time to do it and include the people in that process.
A big thing that you mentioned there, and it's getting real feedback. So a lot of people, when they are, say, looking at their processes, they either assume that because it's been done this way for 10 years and that it is the only way, it's the de facto way, we always had done it. But the fact that you get real feedback from owners of processes, etc., that they find and their experience, and you can put that into the digital process, we find, obviously, and judging by what you're saying there, Greg, is the ownership. So they actually find that ownership increases, or that feeling of ownership of the process, because you're working off real feedback and using that feedback as part of the creation of the process. That increases the adoption rates, so that the guys end up using it more because they've been involved. Did you find that?
Yes, absolutely. If they feel like they own the process before that, to go in there and say you're doing something different without including the process owner along the way, and they are able to put their stamp on it, then they still are going to feel like they own the process and the digitization that went along with it. So absolutely agree with what you said there.
Yeah, it's a huge concern with organizations, is the adoption of the process, because what they're afraid of is that people will still pick up the phone, they'll still write the note, and they'll still do that sort of thing. But when we have found, and it's great that the same thing happened with you, is that when you actually involve the business owners, etc., in the whole creation of these processes, they adopt it because they feel they own it. Yeah, it's
and they're going to push the other people that are involved in the process to use it as well. They're not going to be like, oh yeah, don't worry about that, let's just go back to the old way. They are invested in making sure that we are adopting the new process, because it's going to make their life easier, and they designed it.
Yeah, having that support is paramount. It really is. So yeah, you referred to it there in the previous slide, but you picked on a process initially to kick things off, something that people were familiar with. And it's funny you say it, because sometimes organizations say, well, now that we're starting this, let's go for the most complex thing that we can do. And the unfortunate thing is that it takes them so long to get that in that people lose momentum. Whereas when they pick something that's pretty obvious, that is quite straightforward, and they get the feedback, it seems to work well. So just on that, you picked your first process. Can you tell us a
Yeah.
bit more about it?
Yeah, so we started with our quality assurance group. So with our API and ISO reporting, there's audits and certification that go along with that. They have certain requirements and reporting that's required on that front. So we have non-compliance reporting. So whether it's slight defects from goods that we receive from suppliers or that sort of thing, we want to be logging this and recording it. And so this was all done through email and Excel tracking right now. And as your organization grows, the number of reports that have to come along with this increase. And so it was a great, and the people in the QA group, I think, were open to this sort of stuff because they already were feeling the pain of having to do all the tracking on Excel and emails. And how are we going to manage this as we grow? How do I meet the requirements for when the audits come and I have to give them this information? So we started off with them saying, hey, we think this might be something that'd be worthwhile. Are you interested in this? And the process didn't necessarily change. It was just the form at which it came in and how we took all that data, and we had a repository for it, and it went fairly smoothly. And we got some benefits out of it that we didn't even really fully, I think, appreciate at the start of it. Just so we were very focused on how the information came in and how it was tracked. But now the reporting and the traceability, the auditability of all that sort of stuff is really, really high. So the time that was saved at audit time was significant as well. Excuse me. So another one that we tried, this was onboarding and offboarding process in HR. So this was one where we were developing it at paper. So there was some process improvement, redesign happening at the same time. And we decided to move that onto the digitization at the same time. We did get some learnings out of that doing those at the same time does increase the amount of time and increases the complexity of it as well. So that was one. It's good as working. I think that'd be one where we had some learnings out of that one because it took us a little bit longer than we would have because we were combining the two things. We were combining the digitization and the process improvement side of things. And so it's gone to a good place, but it was just one of our learnings as we've gone through this one is that if you're going to combine those two things, then you have to make sure you plan for that scope on there.
Yeah.
And then performance management tool. So this was a very just simpler one where we didn't have a HRIS where we were able to have this stuff. So instead of having this again in paper documents, in Word documents or Excel, put this onto a place where people can go and enter it. There's some flows you can have where people can submit this to their manager. They can go back. We have different levels that we can do on it depending on the level of employee or where they need to do it. So this was a good one as well. So that I put that one as a simpler one as well.
Right.
And then another one that we had, this one was a little more complicated and we'd already had some experience with it when we'd done this. So we had an idea of what we were taking on, but this was, so we're setting up something for invoice EDI, which essentially we're uploading your invoices to your customers, but you have to do it through a system like Cortex or Open Invoice or some repository where you have to upload it and give a bunch of information. And so our ERP didn't have good capability to be able to do that on its own. And so FlowForma and using the digitization was actually very helpful for us to be able to have that intermediary step to be able to get the information that we had, which was from our ERP invoice plus backup that we would get from the field, combine that all and then upload that into the system. And the FlowForma was the intermediary. We were able to house all that. So it was really helpful from that point of view. It's a more complicated process and maybe not the one that you'd want to start out with, but I think it just shows there's some flexibility in how you can build this in there. It doesn't have to be the whole process, but it can be a part of different processes and makes things easier. Again, we were going to save time for not only the manual uploading, but in terms of having better records of where all this information sits and be able to go back and see it and use that. So those are the main ones we had. We have a couple more that we're looking at in the future, but these are the main processes that we've used so far. And it does cover the gamut, I think, from simple to complex, including redesign.
But I mean, and I would take it from that your fear factor in taking on processes is basically gone now. You just go, hey, you just look at it and go, well, what do we do here to digitize this?
Yeah, I think we're confident in the right scenario. It can be a very valuable tool for us. I do think that I wouldn't say the fear factor, it's not a fear factor, but we want to be careful in how we manage it and understand, take our learnings that we have along the way to increase the probability of success on the way on that stuff. So I think that with our proper management and review, our confidence increases, but we want to make sure we spend that upfront time, like with any project, right? The more upfront time you spend on it, the higher degree your the probability
Success.
of
Yeah,
at the end.
brilliant. One thing that you touched on earlier on was, and it was the collection of the information for your reporting, etc. And I know that you've utilized our partner in Canada with the Pontem guys. But the whole fact that now when you're collecting data that is tight, it makes that job a lot more straightforward.
Yes, absolutely. It helps us get something to have information in place where we can go and see where it is, see where there's issues if we haven't got it or not, tag that stuff, filter it, have the transparency on it. So it really does help us out. And most companies are going to have multiple systems that they work with.
Yeah.
Some are going to do certain things very well. Others might struggle with some other things, and it might change. And this is a tool that we use to fill in some of those deficiencies on some of those other systems without having to move out the system, because it still does certain things very well. It fits very nicely with your Microsoft Office environment, so there's not a lot of extra infrastructure that's in place, and you don't have to go and implement a new system that everyone has to learn to necessarily fill in that gap. So I find the flexibility of the tool has been beneficial for us, particularly just the nature of our company. We have a lot of different parts and that move around and interact.
Great. Just from, a sort of, not say a summary point of view, but takeaways from your project so far. I mean, for sharing with everybody here, if you were to say, listen, keep these things in mind, what would they be?
Yeah, so the picking off the start, picking something that's going to have a high degree of success. So picking a pilot project that works, I think is very important, and engaging with people. We've learned the scalability of it's been very beneficial for us as well on it. I touched on this before, but it's important. It's like the process digitization versus process improvement. Don't confuse the two. There are separate things. And particularly on your pilot, don't pick something that you're going to be doing a lot of process improvement on. And early on, you want to get some of those quick wins, get some familiarity with the system, how it works within your organization as well. And then utilizing phases for rollout. So what I mean by this is that for processes, you're going to learn as you go along, especially if you're making little tweaks. So not trying to get the 100% perfect solution off the start. The system is adaptable. You can go and make changes. That's part of the benefits of it. So starting off with something that's maybe 80% of the solution that you want in phase one, and then saying, we're going to use it for a few months, and then we'll go back and do some other stuff. And what we found is that what you thought you would have done if you did the 100% solution actually changes once you've used it for a few months and you come up with the better solution. So don't try and make it perfect. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Because for us, we're like, even if we get this 80% in, so our onboarding, offboarding, whatever we put in place was better than what we had before, because our process was a little more email based. So now we had some more structure to it through a checklist. Then we also know how to digitize. So it's an improvement over what we had, even if we didn't have every part of it fine-tuned and perfect. And what we found since we moved out is we probably tried to do a little too much of that. We tried to get a little too perfect on the first round, when we would have been better off, if I go back and do it again, better off, let's get the basic 80% structure in place, use it, and then we'll add in the other stuff as we go along. Yeah, and then
that's the just to quote, let's say, perfection is the enemy of progress.
Yeah,
And that's a famous quote. That's Winston Churchill, I think, but it says a lot.
Yeah,
no, it says a lot. I think Mark Twain has something as well along those lines, but basically, don't try and get it perfect before you start at it. Get stuck into it when you're nearly there, and add on as you keep going and improve. Because it's funny, the real world feedback then supports changes, as you said, changes that you wouldn't have anticipated.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other one too that just important is the importance of running pilots of testing prior to roll. Just some standard IT project type stuff that people do, but it's just important for these smaller processes, you are taking that time to make sure that you've mapped it out and you've tested this out. You've worked out any kinks, and so for us with our branches, we'll test it out at one branch, see how it works with other people, take the learnings, and then once we have that, we can roll it out to a larger group, and it just makes any issues that come up or any improvements you want to make, you can identify them, and then when you roll it out, it's going to be a smoother rollout. You're going to have more adoption, higher success.
Very good, very good. And here, of course, is the next big question for you. This is my final question for you.
Yeah.
What's next on the agenda for you guys?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple that we're looking at right now. So the first one is one where I feel like this is an example of how I know it's getting embedded in our organization. So someone from our ops group, one of the managers of our branches, reached out to me and said, hey, I'm looking at this thing. I talked to someone in our QA person. They said that, this might be a good option. FlowForma might be a good option for this to be used. Do you think it would work? And it's essentially, he has a whiteboard in his office where they track a bunch of their jobs, but he wants his guys in the field to have access to it. And he wants to be able to have, instead of someone walking over there and, erasing it and writing some new lines on there, he wants everyone to be able to see that. So it's a perfect process for us that we can improve and do quite simply with FlowForma, and that will be an improvement for them. And so basically they'll have this online. We'll have it so people can access it in the field from their phones, so they can now see, okay, here's what's up now, here's what's changed, and it just makes life a lot easier for them. But the fact that they came to me and I hadn't even thought about this one, to me is a good sign that the organization is starting to think about, hey, how can I do this? How can we digitize our processes and get away from some of this manual stuff?
Very good.
And then another one, just accounts payable processing. So how do we, again, make that a little less manual? How can the digitization, how can this be a tool in there? Again, this would be an example where it probably wouldn't be everything for the digitization, but it would play a key part in assisting that happening. So we're still in the exploratory phases on that and what that could look like, but that's one as well. And then one other one too is just our preventive maintenance tracking side of things. This might be one to do this that's helpful across all the company, opposed to having a little bit segmented by different service lines and systems. So, lots of opportunities on there, and we just want to continue to digitize across the company, and it's a journey, and we're going to continue down that path and learn as we go.
It looks like they're going to be quite impactful, those processes. I mean, they're not just simple ones. They touch a lot of people and have an impact on daily work by the looks of it. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and the thing I like about the tool is that it's not one function specific. You can use it across operations, engineering, quality assurance, HR, finance, IT. Like, there has a high flexibility across the organization on that, and it still has a similar look feel when it's cross-functional processes. So if someone sees it, they're like, oh, I've only seen it for the QA stuff, but now I'm doing onboarding. Oh, I know what this looks like. This looks similar stuff. I'm just going to a different process, but the look and feel is there. The access and how they get into it's the same. So it doesn't feel like I'm going into all these different systems all the time and trying to understand it. It does help that usability.
Great. So like as you say, even though you're in different parts of the business doing different processes, it looks the same, it feels the same,
Yes.
which obviously makes understanding a lot higher. Thanks, Greg. I may call you in on a couple of other points if you'd like to keep hanging around.
Absolutely.
Just want to give people a small bit more information just on FlowForma, and not to keep you much longer, to be honest. We're a Go Microsoft partner, and it's important to know that the platform does sit in the Office 365 environment. So it's an app that sits in there, and the important thing about that, and for you to know, is that all of the data that's collected stays within your tenancy. So it's a very important piece of information, because it means that no matter where you are from a locale point of view, your data is always going to be in the right area. Your data is always going to be in your locale. We don't keep any of your information, which kind of goes against the norm of a lot of organizations, but we don't want your data. We just give the app. That's the only thing. Again, sort of harking back to what I was talking about at the start, that whole area of making the change, making that step is very important. Now, the nice thing is, because you're on Office 365, you don't have to purchase new infrastructure. It's the app. And so you can get up and running quite quickly once you have support within the organization. It's going to give you that option to then roll it out and scale it out. And it's a no-code platform. And what that means is that it gives you the benefit of actually managing the processes yourself. You can take care of them, you can create them, you can get them up and running, get feedback quickly. But it's the outcomes from all of this are really important, because it's not trying to circumvent what, say, your IT department do. It's trying to enhance what they do. Because I don't know of an IT department, for example, that's not flat out with work. This, as Greg was saying earlier on, this can go to every department. It can go in between systems. It is the same look and feel. And that's why it was created, so that you can enhance the processes in the different areas without having to learn a big new tool, without having to change your infrastructure. Once you've Office 365, you're already there. It's very easy to take this on even from a trial point of view. Just try it out. Really simple. You can even use lots and lots of templates there. The reality is, and the nice thing is, we get a lot of great feedback from our customers. And these are just some of the examples of the benefits. So the bottom line is, when you're going to be dealing with finding that champion in the organization, they're going to want to know, why are they going to do this? There is no downside to digitizing. As Greg said, you first of all, you got to have the appetite for it. So you got to, if you're prepared for this and you have support on it, you can tackle it. If you go at processes that are evident, self-evident, it makes it all the easier, because then you're literally transferring that knowledge into a digital format. We have many, many examples of actual stats from different clients on different areas. So some people are more conscious about saving on time. Others are more conscious about saving on, from a planet point of view, on sustainability, on removing paper from the business, getting more scope for getting more out of their people. And bottom line is, all of this equals saving of money. So it's all very nice to do things for the right reasons and to become more efficient. But the reality is, it affects the bottom line, and it has a direct impact per process. Now, you're not going to know, usually you're not going to know which process has the biggest impact. We have clients that would have, like, one of the sort of best clients for digitization has over 400 processes digitized. They would be able to say to you, they know of one process that saves them a fortune, but it wasn't the first one that they did. They thought that the first one they did would have the biggest impact, but it didn't have the biggest impact. It was like the third or fourth. They all have an impact, but sometimes in different setups, a particular process will have a particular impact. So just to summarize, and again, I thank you all for your time before we get into the Q&A. This is not a giant leap of faith, because it is, you do this step by step. You find your champion within the organization, so you get the support. The big thing is to look at a process that is obvious to you. Go for that, and then you're going to get better adoption. So you're going to get better support from all those around you. The whole thing about taking that step means that you're going to become self-sufficient. You're going to empower yourselves to be able to create these processes, maintain them at minimum. I mean, and we're always there. So we do a whole onboarding program as part of taking on FlowForma, where we show you step by step, this is how you do it, this is how you run it. And we're always there anyway to support you, should you have queries, should you have any issues. The nice thing is, because you're dealing with a really agile environment, you're going to be able to show results pretty quickly. At least you're going to be able to show the champions the amount of progress that you've made. The cool thing is as well, because you're now collecting data efficiently and accurately, you're going to be able to monitor that information. You're going to be able to actually make good decisions in the future based upon the information that you've gathered. So the decisions that you make, instead of them being upon hunches or guesswork, they're going to be made upon actual data to back you up. The simplest way of doing it is by trying it out. The reality is, and it's something that I say to most customers, in 5 years' time, everybody's going to be doing this. The difference is those people that have started, they're going to have 5 years worth of data. So if you start in 5 years' time, you're starting from scratch. So why not start now? It aligns itself with because from a sustainability, when's the best time to plant a tree? And they say 20 years ago. But when's the second best time to plant it? Today. So the second best time to start digitizing your processes and becoming more efficient is today. So just it's don't be fearful of it. Straightforward, do the trial, and because you don't have to go for any infrastructure changes, you can just download it. Now, Ursula, if you're there, I hope you're there.
Yes, I'm here.
Cool. Just from a QA point of view,
Yeah.
question. Myself and Greg are here.
Great.
Do you have any questions?
Yes, I've one or two. So we'll probably finish up a little bit early, which some people might be happy to hear. But if you'd like to pop any additional questions into the Q&A section, now is the time to do so. But Shay, you might want to start off with this one. So when organizations are ready to start digitizing or using a process automation tool, how do they start? So quite a broad question, but maybe you could share a couple of steps or tips on how to get started.
Yeah, and I'd say Greg probably has covered this as well. You have to look at your infrastructure. So first of all, for example, if you're on Office 365, you may not be, but if you are, look at what's available in Office 365. Reason being is that you've already paid for the infrastructure. So you're already invested. You've created that environment where you can pull in apps from different vendors, and they all sit on your Office 365 environment, for example. Now, if you're not in Office 365, say you're on Google, you'll have the same scenario. So check out what's available in the stores there. Once you've done that, the best thing to do, I mean, there's a few things you have to tick off. Somebody has to own it. So decide who has ownership of the project. The reason is you're going to have responsibility for it, and whether that be for creation or just management of who is doing what and who is getting trained up, etc. But you've got to have an owner, and you've got to have a supporter in the organization. So somebody has to sign the check, but not just that. Somebody has to be supportive in regards to this initiative is something that the organization wants to do. So otherwise you won't get the adoption rates that you hope to get. So I know there's a few things to it to get it kicked off, because the initial part is very important. Finding the right infrastructure. Don't just pick something that is sitting on the wrong infrastructure. It has to be on the right infrastructure. As I get the support and get the ownership of it. So that's just to kick you off. And as Greg was saying earlier on, pick a good process to start off, something that's pretty obvious. Would you align with that, Greg? Or, I mean, is there anything else? Have I missed something?
No, I agree with that. I think that's where you gotta get started. And I think you have to identify where the benefits are going to be for the organization. So whoever the champion is to be able to really clearly articulate, this is why we're doing it, and here's the benefits we're going to get out of it, right? And there's the stuff that we talked about before, from transparency of data to reducing the amount of people that come into the organization, from getting better use of the people that are in your organization to, this is coming, so we have to do something, right? And I think for most organizations, there is some step they have to take. They fast forward far enough.
Yeah.
So you have to evaluate, what do we want to do, and really try and be proactive about addressing those issues. And yeah, so I think, but having a champion who's there to kind of think through all that and talk about it really helps.
Thanks.
Great, thank you guys. Greg, I think this question came in when you were chatting a little bit about the processes that Great North have developed. So someone is asking, what type of reports or dashboards can you see or use in FlowForma?
Yeah, so there's a lot of flexibility there. So we can do some simple lists and sorting and looking at all the data, and then you can go and get them. You can get them into Excel and do it that way. You can do Power BI, is probably the ones that's the most visually appealing that you can do, where you can start getting your data into Power BI type stuff, and have good graphs and charts for all that side of things. So we found there's a fair bit of flexibility on there. There's some work to be done, obviously, if you're going to be creating Power BI stuff, but once you have the data outside of emails or outside of multiple Excel spreadsheets or in a format that's useful, you can do a lot of different things with that. So our reporting has been, from the more fancy stuff in Power BI to just better organized Excel reports that we're able to download and take information out of and constantly updating on there. So it doesn't live in Excel, but the output gets into Excel, and then we can do some stuff with it from there as well. Shay, I'm not sure if you guys have seen other things as well for the reporting.
Yeah, that's ideal. The whole thing is that you now have information that's normalized and it's accurate. So, yeah, producing the outputs with Excel, even with Excel, but the Power BI dashboards, it's the nice thing again. It's like when you're starting off with the process. If you start off with let's say a straightforward dashboard, you can start evolving. That grows as well. So that whole area of the reports and what the end users see, that evolves pretty much at the same, well, I wouldn't say at the same rate, but it does evolve quite nicely during the whole process.
Yeah.
Perfect. Just another quick question here, Shay, if you want to take this one. Can you integrate other solutions and softwares into FlowForma?
Yeah, so funny enough, this is coming up more and more and more, is the integration. So the integration capabilities, well, with FlowForma, we are very unique. Where is that a very unique or just unique? So it's a unique scenario. We have this external API rule builder that allows you to connect to any system that has API. Now, it would have to have documented APIs. So anybody who's interested in integration, it is not exactly the most colorful area of the business. It would be quite tedious, but it's pretty crucial. So if you need to integrate with databases, the big thing is that the vast majority, and especially when you're online, come with an API, a documented API connectors. So we have an external API rule builder that allows you to connect to those APIs for specific commands, etc., for pulling and pushing data. So what it means is that you can connect to any data set that has those documented APIs rules. It makes it very straightforward. It would probably require, it's not going to be, when you do it once, it's done, but it's not going to be done by a casual user of the system. So it's going to be done by somebody who understands the data that's behind it. Now, again, you don't have to code, so it makes that so much easier. And I used to be a developer back in the day, and I know the type of coding that it takes to interact with other databases. So to have an API rule builder is just going to save you so much time and effort. So yes, that was
Great.
a yes in
Thank you
more
for that,
words.
Shay. No, I'm sure they appreciated the detailed description there, Shay. So thank you for that. And Greg, thank you very much for your input as well. It's been great hearing from from you both. And Greg, great to hear this great success that's currently happening at Great North Equipment too. So thank you so much to everyone for joining today. I recommend we have a lovely new infographic that you can download on the dashboard there. It's our 2022 guide on process automation. Lots of lovely tips and tricks in there if you want to have a look at that. Also, Shay mentioned before, FlowForma do offer a free 14-day trial. You can sign up for that on our website and gain access and have a look at some of our process templates and get a look and feel for FlowForma for yourself. If you have any other questions, we do have a short survey that's going to pop up at the end of the webinar. If you could fill that in, that would be great, and we'll pass that on to our experts. But for now, I'll just say thank you, and thank you again, Shay and Greg, and have a lovely day, everyone.